Hey guys, well the time has finally come. I can start talking about Overwatch. So the NDA's been lifted, PAX East has begun, and the time that I spent at Blizzard can now be shared with all of you because everything that I learned and everything that I saw is now being shown to the public over at PAX, and basically everything's out of the bag, alright? So the version of the game that I got an experience with was, the pre-beta or the alpha or whatever. It was a very early version of the game, okay? So keep that in mind. The beta should be coming in fall, and a lot could change by then. That's, what, like 6 months away? So think about any beta that you've played before and just think about how far a game can go from a beta to the final product. So even like TF2, the game changed a lot, right? So just maybe take everything I say with a grain of salt, but you might get a good idea of kind of what direction they're going with for this game. So just right off the bat, when we were introduced to the game there at Blizzard, they had a presentation for us and a little bit of Q&A. And well, this is a new sort of universe for Blizzard, so they did want to introduce the universe to us. There was a lot of emphasis on like lore and backstory and their environments. They've definitely put a lot of thought into that stuff, okay? So if you're into the story, you're definitely going to have a lot to explore in this game. The people that they invited to the event were mostly, famous YouTubers. I was kind of like the only, I think, maybe not the only, but one of very few, like, competitively minded players. Most people there were more casual, probably, or at least, like, more focused on kind of entertaining an audience on YouTube, like, whether it be in, like, MOBAs or whatever. But most people were YouTubers, most people probably catering to a casual audience, so I bet that they kind of tailored the presentation in that way, for people to kind of hype up the game because of how beautiful and like interesting like the story was and stuff. But I was there interested in the gameplay, right? So I was kind of just kind of twiddling my thumbs until they got to that part. But they kind of addressed sort of where they got the idea for how the game would work, right? And a lot of it was based on MOBAs, and they addressed some FPSs. They kind of avoided even mentioning TF2. Like if someone misspoke and said, "What's your favorite class?" they'd quickly like correct them. "Oh, you mean hero, right?" Well, class hero, same thing to me anyway. They also talked about, what the business model was going to be. A lot of people are interested in that. Um, but so many of these things they said they were unsure of, like whether it'll be free to play or flat fee subscription. I don't know. I really don't have anything to say about that. Like they wouldn't really get locked down on what they thought they would do for the business model. Um, I personally, like I said, was interested in competitive features for the game, and during the Q&A, I was sure to ask them what they saw as like the esports slash competitive vision for the game, and they of course said that they see potential in it. Blizzard is a company that has a lot of esports titles or hardcore games, StarCraft, World of Warcraft, Hearthstone, even I guess. So they've definitely acknowledged that they have their eye set on it, but there's nothing like built in yet, and they were kind of avoiding, again, they were avoiding like being too concrete about whether there'd be like ranked matchmaking or whatever. They said there'd be quick play, that's cool, but um, I was interested in like built-in competitive features like in-game ladders or ranked matchmaking at least, because those kind of features are the things that I wish were in TF2, So I'd love to see them start the game from the beginning with those features, but again, they kind of wouldn't commit to anything. The most that they do is they said, we're putting on these show matches, they're being shoutcasted. We want people to look at this game and think that it's really fun to watch, in like an organized team setting. So I think it would just make sense for the game to be sort of moving in that direction of a competitive shooter. Okay. But just getting into the gameplay, we did get to spend about 3 hours, trading on and off, but we got some hands-on time. But one of the things that they said to us that stuck with me, and maybe it should have stuck with me a lot more was they said that the game is not a DM shooter. We didn't set out to make a DM shooter, okay? So this is not a deathmatching game. That's basically like what you need to accept right now if you are interested in playing this game, okay? TF2 is a deathmatch game. Like you can go into MGE and soldiers gonna be like rocket jumping, flying around. You go for air shots. As a scout, you air strafe all over the place and you hit meat shots, all right? In Overwatch, it's a little bit different. There are classes that there's nothing really comparable to that, and some of the most powerful classes in the game are not going to be comparable to that experience, okay? Um, but I'll kind of address that a little bit more like as we go on. But one of the big things that a lot of you guys are familiar with by now, um, and probably a little bit skeptical about, is the customization features of the game. It's quite limited, okay? So their rationale is, you've probably read it, it's like they want to avoid having the haves and the have-nots, right? They want everything to be standardized, they want everything to be accessible, and basically they want everyone to start kind of on an even playing field in terms of game settings, right? So that means there's not going to be like the option to disable view models. The FOV is going to be capped or locked actually at roughly 85, 90 degrees or something. And the menus are quite simplistic based on what we saw. Um, Sensitivity was on a slider, so it was pretty difficult to like get consistently to one spot that you felt was the right sensitivity. I kind of had to just click somewhere and just hope for the best, really. There's no like numbers there, but again, that could all change. Hopefully it will. But yeah, customization it seems like that's something they're trying to stay away from right now. Eventually you might see like custom like cosmetics and stuff, but you really are going to be kind of playing the same game as everyone else in terms of settings. And how I feel about that is I do like some customization, but in TF2, I've always been one to play with kind of pretty simple things like the default loadout or default HUDs. Mostly, I like having the ability to customize like colors and stuff like that, and it seems to me that won't really be an option in Overwatch. Um, Hopefully, that means that when enough people complain, they'll change, because I think this is going to be one of the biggest issues for a lot of people. But or at least hopefully they'll add in some sort of customization options. But the HUD is probably going to never be editable. Um, I don't know. TF2 is kind of a unique game that it allows you to do that, and even like CS, it kind of doesn't have that option. But they also acknowledge that like in World of Warcraft, you can have custom UIs, and they they admitted that like the players love that kind of stuff, but they're not sure if that's where they want Overwatch to go. So beyond that though, I'll just talk about like what it was like to just play the game for the first time. And it was fun, honestly. It kind of felt like playing TF2 for the first time, meaning like there are so many different classes. I was playing on new maps and like just trying to explore everything, and just I don't know. I'm the kind of player that when I play a new game, I kind of gravitate towards what I find to be the most powerful, I guess, or like what just seems like I can dominate with early on. So the first class I actually really started enjoying the most was Farah, the soldier or rocket whatever class. Um, just because projectiles kind of are so much fun for me, and it seemed like a very powerful class. And but I ended up playing pretty much everything. Um, they all had like, you know, as you'd expect, they all had a unique experience. They are different heroes with different abilities. But in the pubs, we just played with a bunch of people that had never played the game, and I definitely could like dominate pretty hard. Like a lot of the TF2 people that I was playing with, um, or people that had experience in TF2 were the dominant players. So that does transfer over. Like I feel like just having FPS experience in general is kind of an advantage for anyone going into another FPS game, right? But TF2 in particular, you're used to projectiles, you're used to hit scan as well, you're used to movement, so you do get a pretty you do pick it up pretty quickly in this game, I'd say. Um, Other things I do want to mention is that the gameplay is 6v6 locked, okay? So, unlike TF2, where you can have pubs up to 16 players and then you go into like a 6v6 scrim and it feels like a completely different game. It's a 6v6 game designed from the beginning, and they did mention that it just felt like the right number. It wasn't too chaotic, but it wasn't like too empty. And I think that's actually probably for the best, right? We've seen a lot of games like Dota and CS:GO that when they start out with like an experience for the casual player that's the same as the experience for the competitive player, that the game just seems to have much more potential in terms of competitive growth, right? And I think that's one of the reasons that TF2 suffered so much is just the difference between pub play and competitive play, really. So I am proud of them for at least making that decision. I think this game would be pretty insane if they allowed any more than that, just because of how strong some of the characters really are. Um, but in the game, the way that kind of flows is you can change class really at any time. So, like breaking out of spawn, you'll maybe use a certain class, and then after that, you'll switch it up. But actually, one thing that's kind of interesting and unlike TF2 is that if you press tab at any time, you can actually check what classes the other team or what heroes the other team is running. So you can always kind of shift or counter strat, shift your like strategies based on what you see on the scoreboard, which I don't know. I feel like it's interesting, but it's very different than TF2, but it is similar to you know uh, like a MOBA, right? You do know what classes or heroes, champions, whatever they have the whole game, so you kind of can approach it with a strategy that's different based on what heroes you're against, right? But counter stratting could definitely come up in this game. I feel like it plays more towards the offensive advantage, I want to say, because a lot of the best defensive classes um, are kind of stationary or whatever. They have kind of counters as well, so you can tailor your class lineup to attack against that. You can always shift though, so there could be a pretty crazy like meta around like counter stratting and then counter stratting and etc. It could just go on forever, or it could just evolve into like a standard because um, definitely playing the game, you kind of felt like there were certain heroes that were quite powerful and that maybe wouldn't be worth sacrificing at any time, but we'll see, right? But the game types, they were basically the same as what you are familiar with in TF2. There's like capture point into payload, then there's like pure payload, etc. So, and then there's pure capture point. So, pretty similar like attack defend. That's basically what the game is, or the game that I played was in terms of game modes. I'm sure they'll come out with new stuff. They definitely seem open to new sort of game types. They said they probably though are avoiding capture the flag. This was one thing that I found kind of interesting, because the reason was that they acknowledge that certain characters are all about like their mobility and their movement, and if you have like a tracer, if you're familiar, the tracer can dash, and they felt like, well, that'd be kind of ridiculous, letting a tracer pick up the flag and then you dash. So, how could they make a capture the flag around that? Maybe they'd have to like ban the class or ban the ability, but then people that love that class are going to feel like they can't play that game mode. So they want everyone to be able to play their favorite class, favorite hero at any time in any game mode and feel kind of effective. Another interesting thing though, within your 6v6 lineup, you can actually run an unlimited number of one class. So you're not, based on like the first impression that I had of the game, like when I saw their first dev match, I thought like once you pick a hero, like it's locked out, no one else can use it. But actually, that's not the case. You could have a game of 6 tracers versus 6 tracers, right? Or it'd basically be like 6 scouts versus 6 scouts, which to some people is the dream come true, but for me that it's not it's not the best. I think the best team compositions might combine a couple of the same, you know, like um, there's a lot of like tanks, so having a few tanks is definitely a big advantage. Um, but you can mix and match pretty well. Um, so there's a lot of freedom to make new strategies, I guess, in terms of heroes. Um, but in terms of like movement, and abilities and ultimates and stuff, the movement is like fairly slow. Like there's not a lot of advanced movement. You can't. I tried to kind of like bunny hop, but it's a new engine, so it's not like based on Quake or anything. I don't think. So you can't really bunny hop. You can't really strafe jump. Um, Movement abilities are tied to cooldowns basically. So if you're the tracer, you can dash, but every time you hit the dash key, you're like on a cooldown, right? You can dash 3 times and then you're on a cooldown until you recharge, and then you can do it again. If you're on um, Pharah, you can rocket uh, rocket pack or whatever, jet pack up, and get a huge boost, but then you're on a cooldown, right? You can hover as well on that hero, but um, then on some other classes, there's really no movement ability. Some of them are pretty grounded, they just kind of walk at their speed. And it does feel a bit slow, but as long as it kind of affects the flow of the game, I'd say. Like you move as a team. So some people are kind of built to be more initiators, or they take ground because of their movement, and then the other heroes just kind of follow up or secure that ground and then hold it. Um, but in terms of just like how the game felt, it did feel good. It felt like quite responsive and felt like I had control, of my character. We were on land, so things were registering pretty well. Um, it does feel pretty solid in terms of just as an FPS game. Like you have decent control. It doesn't feel like too slow, and like it doesn't feel like just like the guns make no sense, which to me is great because whenever I play Counter Strike, I feel like the guns make absolutely no sense. So there's at least that aspect of it. The guns, they make sense. They're pretty easy to pick up, and that's really one of the things that they've kind of, I think, emphasized, is just making something that's simple, and it really is. Like having like one gun for most characters, just one gun, and then everything else is abilities. Like you have just one gun and then like two abilities that affect maybe how the gun works, but you never have to like scroll through items. You never have to do any of that. You can use abilities very quickly, and I think that aspect of simplification is actually pretty cool. I like that because it just means you can you can like make quick decisions in terms of which abilities you use at a certain time. You don't have to always like be on the right weapon at the right time, and you can't really get caught out as much, which to me is cool. I actually do like that. I think TF2 would work fine if they actually just had like soldiers say be on uh like rocket launcher only, but then you press a button and then you're shooting shotgun. Like it's not that bad, honestly. I think a lot of people do get kind of worried when they see cooldowns, but it kind of makes sense. Um, it actually works pretty well in my opinion, and it's just there for simplification, I'd say, and it works. Um, I will talk about like a couple of the new characters that they added, which I actually thought were pretty cool. They added in this cowboy guy, Mccree, and he has like an ability to roll around, and he also has like a flashbang grenade that kind of stuns people. Um, I thought, you know, it was cool that their new character that they're adding has like a movement ability, and he also has like kind of a movement affecting ability. I think a stun is questionable. A lot of people like freaked out. They're like during the Q&A, they're like asking questions about the flashbang, and I was like, I feel like those aren't the best questions to be asking right now. Now's not the you're wasting this opportunity asking about flashbangs. But then the other character was a tank called Zarya, and this one has like a lightning gun and a grenade launcher. So that was actually another one of the first classes that I went to play, just because like the weapons were like the kinds of weapons that I would want to play with. Um, the grenade launcher is definitely like my favorite weapon in TF2. So anything with like an arch projectile, that's like my favorite thing to use in any game, I think. Like in Unreal Tournament, I love the flat cannon, you know. So I quickly gravitated towards that character. Um, but I like that, you know, these characters that they're adding, they have like high skill abilities as well. So some of the other ones are just kind of like passive skills. You know, you don't really need quick reaction times, or you don't have a lot of mobility options. So the skills that it takes to play those ones are different, you know. But it seems that they're still trying to build characters that have like skill skill intensive like movement or aim, you know, which I thought is good. But a lot of you guys also have heard about like a dev match that we ended up playing, and we did like a TF2 versus devs show match there, and we did get destroyed. So you know, I sucked. Whatever, it's fine. But it really came down to team composition and coordination and experience in the game. But really, what stood out to me the most during that show match was that really how important the tanks are. Okay, so for the flow of the game, like the tank is insane. Okay, there's characters that can put up shields, and there's characters that have a ton of health. These are the tanks, right? And there are healing classes that can buff them up, you know. So I would just be trying to push, and keep in mind we had no voice communication. We couldn't even type to each other, so there was like really no way for us to coordinate anything. But we couldn't even cap a single point. We couldn't get past the defense because the tanks are very difficult to handle as a single player, you know. And then the rest of their classes were like trolling us because like I'm sure you guys have all seen like the mini sentries and stuff, and what you could do is like hide them like on the ceiling, and there'd be like a beam across the ceiling, and then you walk past it, and then there's a sentry hiding behind that beam because you can put them literally everywhere. So he's like, you go forward, there's a tank that you can't even touch because he's got a shield, and you have like just one gun, you know, and then you go to the side, and then you're getting shot in the back by sentries. It was very difficult. It showed that the game is really about team coordination. It's about strategy. It's about covering like the whole map, with your characters and your abilities, and pushing as a team is definitely a requirement. You can't really make solo plays. Like, as much as I wish it were possible, even if you're the best tracer in the world, I feel like if there's a tank, there's no way that you're gonna be able to like break through that alone, unless there is an ultimate ability that every class might have an ultimate that could maybe chip away at them, but really it's pretty difficult to do anything on your own, you know. So that was like the biggest impression that I got from it, and that goes back to like not being a DM shooter. Like, you can have the best DM in the world, but you're not going to be able to deal 2,000 damage to destroy a tank on your own. Like, it's just not possible. So one other thing that I kind of forgot to mention was the ultimate abilities, right? So a lot of people were concerned about some of the ultimates. The way that they work is you deal damage basically, or you heal, or you do whatever you do your job, and then your ultimate charges up. It's on a like 100% sort of meter. You build it up, right? So think of it like a buff banner, sort of. That's how all the ultimates work. You build them up. But because of that, like, you can build them up pretty quickly. Spending them isn't really that big a deal. Maybe you want to coordinate with your team so that, because some of them you can combo. I like that the game has like ideas for combos, like you combine some ultimate abilities with other heroes' abilities, and you get some really powerful like attacks going. And that's something that coordination, I think that would be kind of rewarding for team coordination. It'd be pretty fun to pull some of those things off. But the ultimates, they're not that big a deal. Some of them are powerful. Like, most of them for the combat classes, like, if you hit your ultimate, you're gonna kill people in one shot. Like, that's just kind of how it works. But I think one thing that people don't really get is how vulnerable you are when you use the ultimates. So a lot of people, like, they've seen the Reaper ultimate, right? and what it is I think it's called Death Blossom. He does like AoE damage to everyone, basically one shots everyone. But if you just shoot him, he's dead. Like Reaper's they're pretty like weak, you know? So these are the kinds of things that you can't just like charge an ultimate then just go win the game on your own. Again, it's not the kind of game where you can make solo plays. So maybe there is, you know, a time when the Reaper ultimate will come in and he'll just kill everyone, but it won't just happen because some guy's like really good at Reaper, so he's just gonna go kill everyone on his own. It's only gonna work when the team coordinates, you know? And there was another ultimate that they just showed, which was Mccree. He has the dead eye, right? Where he kind of walks slowly and locks onto everyone, and then once it's fired, like if you're locked on, you die instantly. It's just hit scan. Everyone on your screen dies. But during the games that we played, like there were so many people trying to do it, and you'd see them because he basically has to stand still when he's using it. He just dies. Like they just shoot him. Or there would be so many times when I was on Pharah and um, I'd launch myself into the sky and I'd use my ultimate, start raining down, and then I'd die. Like I'd get off a few rockets, like my barrage would be going, and then I'm just dead. Like people just shoot you, you know? So you can definitely get countered pretty hard. So ultimates, I'd say they're just like another attack, you know? They're not really game breaking yet. Maybe I don't understand the game well enough, but it seems like ultimates aren't as insane as a lot of people are afraid they might be, okay? And also it's like even if you kill a bunch of people, like people spawn pretty quickly, you know? At least at least if you're on defense and using them, you know. Maybe it's good that offense gets a pretty big advantage by using ultimates cuz you can I don't know. On some of these maps I feel like they could be over pretty quickly because the maps aren't too big, you know. So some pretty a few like well-timed pushes and then the round could be over, you know. So I'm very curious to see how they how they like tally scores in competitive and like how they balance that out. But anyways, so hopefully you gotten some idea of kind of what to expect from the gameplay. But after actually playing the game, I did have a chance to talk to Jeffrey Kaplan, who's like the game director of the game, and he worked on like World of Warcraft, and he's like super famous for that. But I was actually surprised to find that he's actually familiar with 6v6 TF2, you know, and I was talking to him a bit, and he's like, so like the normal composition is like two scouts, two soldiers, a demo man, and a medic, right? And I was like, yeah, yeah, you're right. But his question was like, does anyone ever play spy? You know, like is that a viable class? And I kind of had to explain to him kind of how the 6v6 meta or standardized classes have kind of come about, and most of it's due to mobility, right? So he did understand that, and he kind of he said that this game is trying to be different. He wants kind of every class to have its role, because this is one of those games where like people are like TF2, even like people are gonna be role players. They have their favorite and they want to be able to use it at all times. So they're trying to kind of balance it around that. Um, Another thing that I talked about that I thought was beautiful about TF2 was like the medic being so important yet so vulnerable. His mobility is so limited compared to all the other combat classes. But then he said, there is the healing class, the mercy class, but the mercy has like insane mobility, like can hover around, follow around Farah when she's flying, and like that makes it a much different experience, I'd say, than TF2 healing. So a lot of the parallels that you're gonna draw between TF2 and Overwatch, there's gonna be something that's just drastically different at the same time. So it's really not the same experience that you might expect. He also kind of talked to me about how they come up with like their counters and stuff, or new characters. So one of the things that a lot of people are talking about, right, was the flashbang thing, and actually that kind of can stun a tracer, right? Tracer's supposed to be the fastest, but if you hit the flashbang, you stun tracer and you can just quickly kill tracer. A lot of these characters are like really, really soft, like they're really easy to kill. If you just hit a few shots and they'll die. That's another reason that team coordination is so much more important because if you go for solo play, you're just gonna die so quickly. Um, but they just said, they don't want to design constant like counters. They don't want to make characters that are just counters of counters of counters. But they just try to make heroes that they find fun, things that they want to play, things that they think are cool, and then they naturally kind of evolve and fit in within the other heroes. And at this point in time, there's like a dozen heroes, and there's blank spots on the hero selection screen for like another dozen. So there could be a huge change. Again, that's why everything that that I say now could be so wrong because in in like 2 years, or even when the game comes out, there could be another like handful of heroes that come out and the whole game could play differently. So again, like I said, things can change, but hopefully you've gotten some idea of what it's like. Um, I think the game does have potential. It will be popular. We all know it. Blizzard will make it popular. Because they're doing something right, which is they're catering to both a casual and a hardcore audience, and I feel like they've proven that they can pull that off. So the game will be popular. It probably will become a competitive title. I think even if Blizzard didn't want it to be, people will make it that. And hopefully they'll comply. Hopefully they'll make it easy for people to compete. I've heard that in StarCraft 2 they've kind of limited, the access to competitive features or something like that. I don't know, like who can run tournaments, which I think is pretty silly, but hopefully they learn from those mistakes. They do have so much experience in other games that they can they can hopefully learn from it, and they're really passionate about the game, which is cool. But ultimately, to me, it is more important if the game is good, and I think it is a good game, but going into it, I really would have to kind of let go of the ego of, having experience in TF2 and like coming from a DM shooter background, and just if I was going to play this game, I'd have to embrace a new mindset, be prepared to play something that plays at a different pace, that has a different play style, that, just emphasizes different things. But if you have a team and you guys are willing to work on stuff and get your shit down, I think there's a lot to learn, and it could be a rewarding game. So, I'm looking forward to it. The game comes out in fall. Hopefully, you all can get beta keys. Hopefully, I can get one. Hopefully, we can all just give it a try, and hopefully, it delivers. That's it. So, thanks, guys. If you have any other questions that you want to ask me, anything I didn't really cover, or anything you're still curious about, feel free to ask in stream, in comments. I'll probably make a thread. Um, but yeah, hopefully this helped. Hopefully, I keep saying hopefully, but that's kind of all there is. It's it's just hope for the future. That's what a lot of people see in this game because of TF2 just kind of not delivering on all of our expectations lately. But until next time, thanks, guys.